Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News, untwisted, unsweet news on peoplesinternetradio.com with myself and Jason Holmes. Hi Jason, how you doing, mate?
Good evening, Andy. I'm doing very well, thank you, and how are you?
I'm doing really well, and I'm also really excited because, as you've seen, we've been on a roll with guests lately, and we've got someone who we haven't been hearing a great deal from lately. He's had a lot of personal problems and ill health, and it's with great pleasure that I'd like to welcome to Raconteurs News Roger Hayes. Good evening, Roger.
Good evening, Andy and Jason. How are you?
Good evening, Roger.
How are you both?
I'm good.
I hate it being described when that I've been ill. I had a bit of cancer. It was cut out. No big deal. I've been as right as rain, and I think a lot of the sort of stories that were going around that I was almost dead and buried.
Yeah, those stories will rear their ugly heads whenever anybody gets any opportunity like that. Are you still there, Roger?
I am indeed.
Sorry, it just went a little bit quiet. So, anyway, I'm sure that everybody that's listening, myself and Andy, we wish you all the best, and, with your continued recovery, so is the message that Roger Hayes is on his way back?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, it's been very good for me because I've taken a great deal of time to spend on doing research, and we've been able to uncover some really fascinating stuff, which is going to benefit us all. And obviously, I hope we'll touch on that this evening and go through some of the stuff that we've actually found out. And well, to explode into it right now, I can say that there's what we discovered in legislation is there's actually no provision in legislation whatsoever for a bank, a mortgagee, to take possession of a mortgagor's home. And when we realised that, we found that we really felt that was groundbreaking stuff.
Well, that sounds absolutely massive, Roger.
It is massive. It's absolutely so important. It's so vital. It's one of the reasons we thought,
Oh, we're breaking up a little bit there, Roger. We seem to have lost you. Are you still there?
The wonders of modern technology. It must be the wind. Jonas, it's this one, isn't it? We're called.
Is it? I don't know.
This one's called Jonas. Yeah, Jonas.
Ah, right.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's Jonas is outside, you see.
Oh, I see. Yes,
and he's coming to get you.
We're calling Roger back in at the minute. Let's hope we get him back shortly.
Yeah, let's hope so. I had a lovely walk around Nottingham today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, very windy. And I didn't really get to see much. I had a cappuccino in Squares, if anybody knows where that is. Anyway, that was this morning, so that's my day. I've had a trip to Nottingham this morning for my wife to go take my wife to a meeting, and then pretty much get home and back to recuperating.
As you do. Yeah, well, yeah. It seems like things aren't going well with getting Roger in here. We'll see if we can call him back in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I was over Nottingham myself yesterday, funnily enough, and I went over to see our mate Mickey Summers, who's unfortunately he's not well at the minute, and he asked me to pass on a message that he's out of circulation for a while, but he's not backing down, and he'll be back bigger and stronger than ever before when he does come back. So he's going to be out of circulation for a little while, but there's plenty of people stepping into his shoes, so that shouldn't really be an issue.
Yeah, it's vitally important that you can do that. You can take a step back and withdraw yourself from all the nonsense that's going along around you. I'm not saying that what Mickey's going through is nonsense, but it does bring with it quite a circus, and it must be really demanding on him personally, just for everyday life, I suppose. And when you're carrying the sort of baggage around that Mickey is as well, it's going to make it more and more difficult.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so it's good that he's taking some time off. I'm sure everyone wishes him well, and we look forward to a stronger Mickey coming back and a brighter, bubblier one. And I want to, as well, I think there's an advert on TV that sometimes come on. I think it's for some sort of prepayment smart meter or something, and it's got this situation where someone's in the shower and then the electric goes off, and which is why you need to get a smart meter, because then you can do it from your phone. And that guy always reminds me of Mickey. I always think of Mickey in the shower. So if anybody's seen that, I don't know what it's. I can't remember. It's some smart meter thing, prepayment advert. But yeah, it always reminds me of Mickey is in the shower and the electric goes off.
No, I've not seen that one, mate. Oh God, you're quite the telly expert. At least we've got somebody who knows what's going on the telly.
Yeah, well, you've got as much time as me then on your hands. Then yeah, you do get to watch a bit of telly.
Yeah,
that's one of the joys of recuperating.
I tell you what, Jason, if you could just sit back a few inches from your mic, you're just reverbing a bit there, yeah.
Yep, any better?
That's a lot clearer, mate. Yeah.
Smashing.
Oh, well, sorry for this, folks. We're still trying to reconnect with Roger. Obviously, somebody doesn't want him talking to us. But just to kind of go down with what Roger's doing, we know that he's got a conference coming up at the Liner Hotel in Liverpool on Saturday, the 13th of February. And I believe it's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., isn't it?
In Liverpool?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Is it on the 13th?
13th of February, Saturday the 13th.
Saturday the 13th, yeah. It's some sort of conference in it.
Yes. Well, I believe it's the launching of this new information and new project that Roger was going to tell us about there. Unfortunately, seemed to be having a bit of trouble reconnecting to him, but I'm sure Skype will let us talk to him eventually, hopefully, maybe.
Is he showing up as online?
Yes, he's showing up as green. And it's showing up that it's ringing him now, but it's not going so well.
No, not going so well. Yeah, we're going to this conference on the 13th. You'd think that we'd know more about what's going on, wouldn't you? And what's going to be happening, since we are going to be attending.
Well, I did have a few words. It was Pete Bromfield who put me onto it, who was on with Gordon Bowden the other week. He did give me a few outlines, gave me the video that was on the website that Roger's got now, the bcgroup.org.uk, and there's a video on there that gives you a little bit of insight into what Roger's doing. I'll tell you what I'm going to try and do. Excuse my cough. We're having trouble getting hold of Roger on Skype, so what I'm going to try and do is I'll put a tune on, and then we'll drop this call, and I'll try and call Roger on his mobile, and then we'll see if we can get him that way. Is that okay with you, Jason?
Sounds like a plan, my friend.
Yeah. Okay.
Stick a couple of tunes on, let's get this technical stuff sorted.
Yeah, well, just for a bit of a treat for everyone, we've got the latest brand new cover version from our mate Keno in the chat room, and this one it's something a bit different, and with harmony there from Susie, and we'll be back with you as soon as we can get Roger reconnected. Okay, see you in a few minutes, folks.
And tanks. Genocide is wrought by the bidding of the banks. You've got no voice cause you don't have a say. Rise above the parapet, they'll blow your life away. I say, whoa! God, you're
reconstruction.
Wow, I say, what is it used for?
Raping and abduction.
War is a product of a sick diseased mind, maximizing profit through killing off mankind. The guy have no value, so then send your kids to hell, while Zionism triumphs with the sound of the death knell. I say, wow, God, you're, what is it good for?
Populous reduction.
Wow, I say, what is it used for?
Mind control induction.
Was manifested by insecure greed. Should you protest it, your kids will go in need. While you pay your taxes, you forge your own chains. You forfeit your freedom, and nothing else remains. I say, wow, God, you're, what is it good for?
Interracial ruction.
Wow, I say, what is it used for?
Vibrational transduction.
You're a citizen of the EU, you are entitled to. Keep your nose clean and do as you're told. Pay your bills without question. Pay for the privilege of being alive. Give your kids to the state, you know it's good for them. Give all your money to the rich, they know what's best for you. Stand by as your community crumbles. Watch TV and eat shit. Catch a terminal disease and die young. And, above all else, don't mention the war!
Hello everyone, my name is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to peoplesinternetradio.com, one of the major voices of truth in our world.
Hello folks, we're back again now, and I hope you enjoyed that tune from Keno, and we've got Roger Hayes back on the line. You there still, Roger?
I am indeed.
And we'll just see if we can get Jason back in the call, and we'll be away. So yeah, I'll just explain, you've got this conference coming up in Liverpool on the 13th of February, haven't you? Would you like to tell us as much as you can about that, please?
Well, the conference, the important thing, of course, is the date, which is Saturday, the 13th of February. The conference starts at 10 a.m. And it's actually, the details are on the website, thebcgroup.org.uk. And the conference is about a mass action against the banks. So it's a campaign. It's targeted at actually building the numbers to stop paying our mortgages, stop paying loans, student loans to the banks, etc. But we're not suggesting that people do it unilaterally. We're suggesting a mass movement of people who will not pay their mortgages, their loans, etc. to the banks when we're ready to do so. So the whole emphasis is on making sure that we have got the weight of numbers, and the emphasis is to justify what we're doing, to explain exactly why we're able to do it, that it's lawful. What we're doing is actually because it's the banks that are breaking the law, and that we are entitled to stop paying our mortgages because the interest that's attached to them is illegal, as is the interest attached to all loans, because banks don't lend money. Now, I can't hear you at all, Andy. I don't know whether you can hear me.
my apologies. I was muted there. My fault. Just trying to get Jason back in. Yeah, what I said there was, from what I understand from the video that's on your BC Group website, banks don't lend money, they facilitate credit.
That's right, and that's two entirely different monetary concepts, very, very different. And I think a lot of people in the freedom and truth movement understand it, but that probably represents less than 5% of the population. So for those people who don't understand the difference between lending money and facilitating credit, it's quite simple. If I have £1,000 in my bank account and you want to borrow that £1,000, then I can transfer it from my bank account to your bank account. And my bank account is zero, and then your bank account is £1,000. That is lending money. In other words, it's money I've already earned, it's my money, I've done the labour to actually justify me having that money, and I then can lend it to you. Whilst you're borrowing that money, I lose the benefit of it, and therefore I would be entitled to charge you interest. But Andy, for you, I'd let you have it free of interest. Now, with issuing money, what happens is when you go to a bank, you actually sign a promissory note and the bank creates new money. And it's actually covered in the Bank of England website. If anybody wants to check it out, it's quite interesting. You go to the Bank of England website. On the left-hand side, there is an item called Publications. That takes you to a page. On the page there is a section for bulletins. And if you...
Oops, sorry, we've got Jason trying to ring us as well there.
That's what's happening. I think I'm getting calls from Jason on one side and you on the other, and potentially that's what's causing the problem.
Yes.
I think I'm just going to switch that off.
Okay, yeah, if you switch that one off with Jason.
Yeah, that was what was causing the problem, I think, that I actually had on my computer here two segments. One was for, or two calls. But anyway, moving on. So if anybody wants to actually, if anybody wants to actually go to the Bank of England website, it's Publications on the left-hand side. Then it's bulletins, and if you then go to 2014, the first quarter, you'll see an article which is described as money creation in the modern economy. And what it says is very straightforward. When a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit. Deposit means money. A matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. So what the Bank of England is saying is that when you sign a promissory note, you are the cause for new money being created. The bank is not lending you money, they're merely acting as a witness to your act of signing a promissory note and creating new money. What you're actually doing is you're getting funds from the future, you're borrowing from yourself in the future, and you're making use of that money today. Are you still there, Andy?
I'm still here. Roger, can you hear me okay? Oh, sorry.
Had to wait to myself and not realising that you'd gone, but you're still there.
Yeah, sorry about that. And the mobile's going as well at the minute. I've had to switch that off. So, yeah, it's all going a bit crazy. But, yeah, we're here. We can carry on.
Okay, so just continuing what I was mentioning about the fact that when you go into a bank and you borrow money, you sign a promissory note, and it's the promissory note that actually creates the money. So you are actually getting an advance of your earnings in the future. You forego your income in the future based on you being able to use that money today. So it's your money. It's actually your money.
Uh-huh.
So the difference between a loan is it's somebody else's money, and a facility is it's actually your money from the future being used today. Now, if it's your money and you're the person that's created it, the banks have no entitlement to charge interest. Now, having said that, I acknowledge that the banks most certainly have the right to charge a fee, because their job then is to make sure that you pay back the money, because you're drawing down from mutual credit. It's the mutual credit of the nation that you're actually sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once people understand that that the actual way the monetary system works is designed to work like that, it's designed that everybody has an entitlement to draw down from the mutual credit of the nation. It's the nation's money supply. It doesn't belong to the banks. And when we get our heads around this, that you know, the country itself creates its own money, and that money is there to be used in commerce for all of our benefits. The banks, their job is to oversee it. They have a responsibility to oversee it. They also have a responsibility to make sure that they only lend money to people who can pay it back. Again, I'm sorry to ask, but are you still there, Andy?
Yeah, still here, mate. Yeah, Jason's trying to call into us, but unfortunately we can't seem to add him to the call that way. So what I'll do, I'll add Jason back in at the next break.
Okay, fine. As it keeps flashing in front of me that you've gone, so I'm you know, once again, I don't want to be talking to myself. I do enough of that as it is.
No,
but,
absolutely. You're still here. We're still going out live.
So coming back to the purpose of the conference is to explain in detail two things. Well, not two things, there's several issues, but the most important thing is, one is explaining to people how we are justified in not paying back or paying off the mortgages, because we're effectively campaigning to get back the interest. And in many cases, a lot of people have paid their mortgage off a long time ago. If you borrow £100,000 at 5% over 25 years, you end up paying almost twice as much back. And the average interest over many decades has been far higher than that 5%. So essentially the banks, who are not lending you money but are there as witness to the fact that you are drawing down from mutual credit, are earning £100,000 on every £100,000 mortgage that is created. That is just criminal, absolutely appalling. And I think one of the important things is that if people realize how much the banks were making on the back of mortgages, people's mortgages, it's their blood, sweat and tears, they would be horrified, because they put nothing into it other than witness the fact that you've signed the document to create the money in the first place, sign the promissory note. And how different all of our lives would be if we didn't have to pay twice the amount of money that we borrowed. How different our lives would be if we paid off our mortgages in 15 years, not 25 years. How different our lives would be if we could afford to buy a home as opposed to rent. How different our lives would be if the revenues that were being sucked from us by the banks were actually in the hands being used by our families. The world would change on the back of us campaigning to stop paying the banks the money that they do not deserve to take from us. So that is a major part of the conference. That's a major part, is explaining, justifying our actions, and of course explaining another important point, which is part of what we discovered whilst I was taking my little sojourn and doing a lot of extra work on the law, is that there is no provision in legislation whatsoever for a mortgagee, i.e. the bank, to take possession of a family home. All of the legislation that's written refers to repossession, and there's a very big difference between possession and repossession. The banks can't repossess something they didn't have in the first place. Repossession is designed for trespassers. And if you actually go through legislation and you compare it with the history of what went on before, you actually start to build a picture around all the pieces. And in fact, the word repossession refers to this. If you went on holiday and you came back and you found that somebody had moved into your home, squatters had moved into your home, you could, under common law, round up all your neighbours and your friends and break down your own door and kick them out. You'd be entitled to do that because it's your property. But if those squatters were burly and bigger than you, and your neighbours were cowardly and wouldn't help you, you would go to the court and you would apply to the court for a repossession order. The court would give you that order, and in fact they ask you to sign, because there's an element of urgency attached, they ask you to sign what's called an EX96. Now, the EX96 exonerates the county court and the bailiff from any liability in the case you got it wrong. Not that you wouldn't know where you lived. So that's what the repossession is all about. All repossession orders are about being able to go to a court and get back your home, repossess your home. It is not there for the banks. And the way the banks get around this, the trick they use, is that when they actually go to the court and they fill in a form N5, On that form, it says, does this involve any human rights issues? Well, being thrown out of your home most definitely does involve a human rights issue. And what the banks or the agents of the banks should do is they should actually tick the box saying, yes, this is a human rights issue, and then it goes into a different court, because a county court is not a court to hear a human rights issue. And of course it would be thrown out. It would be thrown out on the grounds that you can't throw a family out of its home on the basis of a debt. And besides, the legislation has been written specifically so there is a remedy for the bank. There is a remedy for the bank, and the remedy is provided for in the Law of Property Act of 1925. And that Law of Property Act provides that, first and foremost, the banks can simply reschedule your loan. If you've got into difficulty, you can't pay your mortgage, then all the bank needs to do is to extend it over a longer period of time, lower the amount. And bear this in mind, there's no reason why they wouldn't do that, because nobody is waiting to be paid that money back, because the money was created out of nothing in the first place. It's your money, it's an advance from the future, and you can take as long as you want to pay it back, because nobody is disadvantaged. So the whole prospect of the banks throwing people out of the homes because they're owed money is a complete lie. It's a nonsense.
That's quite an astounding discovery, really, Roger.
It's groundbreaking. It's absolutely groundbreaking, because it changes. It means this. This is the most important thing. Every single eviction has been unlawful. Yeah. Everybody has been thrown out of their homes by virtue of the threat of eviction, has a claim against the banks. They can sue the banks, and because of the element of fraud, 3 times the amount of money that's involved. Now, you know, the problem that you've got is you go into courts, and of course we've got a network of brown envelope judiciary working in the courts now. Yeah. These people are beyond the pale. They've been bought off, and you can't trust the judges. I'm not saying all judges are corrupt, but what I do tell you is this. I'm absolutely convinced that the judges select their own cases, and the judges who have been bought always make sure they're dealing with the mortgage cases. And I have seen this time and time and time again. When I go in and try and help people with courts, it's always the same judges. You can absolutely guarantee if it's a repossession order, it's the same guys that are being put forward. So we've got criminality in our courts, and we've got people being evicted when there is no lawful way in which they can be evicted. And I think that's the key to everything, is that we can justify our actions. We can say that these banks are criminal. In the first instance, they're not lending us money. In the second instance, where we get behind in our payment, and we should pay back the capital, let's get this perfectly clear. We have an obligation to repay the capital, but there is no obligation, none whatsoever, to pay interest on money that the banks didn't have, and that money, in fact, is ours because we forego our income in the future.
Wow. That really is a biggie, Roger. What I'm going to try and do, I'm just going to try and reconnect this call so we can get a better line and perhaps get Jason back in. So I think a tune from Pink Floyd might be appropriate for about 4 minutes while we do that. So back in a few minutes, folks.
This is Max Egan, and you are listening to Raconteurs News on peoplesinternetradio.com.
Thanks for that, Max, and we're back, and we've got Jason back on the line. And Roger's still there, hopefully?
I'm still here.
That's excellent. You're still there, Jason?
I'm still here.
We're back in business then. Okay, Roger, so sorry for the interruption. Please do go on.
Well, I'm just explaining the conference. The purpose of the conference was to explain, obviously, what we've discovered over the last 12 months with regards to the fact that there is no provision in legislation at all for a mortgagee, the bank, to take possession of a mortgagor's home. And when you know the conversation I had over the period of time that we were discovering that was fascinating, because my instincts have always been that you know, an Englishman's home is his castle, and you can't throw a family out of their home on the basis of a debt. And yet that's what the banks were doing. So I went and studied the history of it all, and it's quite interesting, because at the turn of the century, we had a situation where 77% of the population are actually renting property. So there weren't many mortgages. And we have what's called a VIF gauge and a MOR gauge. And MOR gauge means dead hand, and VIF gauge is live hand. And when you actually look at the meaning of the words and the history of it all, you start to put together a picture. And the picture is this, that most people, as I say, were actually renting at the time, 77%, 23% owned property, and ownership, mostly there were the aristocracy who owned lots of properties and rented them out. Now, if anybody wanted to expand a farm, for example, what they would do is they put up as collateral the income from that farm, in other words, the produce. Now, a lender who'd lent to a farmer, who he found that he wasn't being paid the mortgage money he was due, he wouldn't want to take possession of the farm. He wasn't a farmer. So what he would do, he would secure the income of the farm by way of securing the produce. So it was the live produce of the farm which the mortgagee would secure, and that's where the VIF cage, because it's a living farm, it's producing produce. But when it got to the point of lending money for a property that was a home, there was no income. They were relying on the income of the owner of the property, and therefore it was regarded as a dead hand as opposed to a living hand. And in 1925, legislation was written, the Law of Property Act, that actually provided for a security for the bank, which was to take possession of the income. And you now find that if you go and buy a property, a buy-to-let property, and you rent it out, the contract that you sign is different. It's based on the Law of Property Act of 1925, and that allows for the Law of Property Act receiver to take possession of the income, the rent of the property. But, and it's a massive but, there is no provision in the 1925 legislation for them to take possession of the property. And I'm going to step in and ask the question, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. I'll just knock my camera off in the hope that it might improve the call quality, Roger.
Okay. And it has. And it has.
Excellent. It's just, it's very quiet then. It's probably because I'm doing all the talking, but I'm on a thread now, so...
No, we were just hanging on your every word, Roger.
So just to explain the Law of Property Act 1925, which is important to understand, is that the bank can actually take possession of the income of the property, but they can't take possession of the property. But there is another remedy, and the other remedy is they are entitled to sell the property. So, for example, if you bought a property and you were taking the mickey, and that you were just point blank refusing to pay off the money that you borrowed, then the bank could legitimately sell your property at auction, and you would then have a new owner. And that new owner, and deservedly so, if you're not going to pay back the capital, then you're putting your liability on the community debt, and that's why there has to be a remedy. So the remedy through the Law of Property Act 1925 is the bank can sell your property, and they would sell it at auction, and then the new buyer could then ask you to leave, because at that point you'd be a trespasser. And at that point, of course, if you as the trespasser did not leave, then they could go to the court and they could get a possession order based on the fact that you were a trespasser. And of course, that's what it's designed to do. The forms that you fill in actually refer to trespassers. And again, what happens with the bank is once they have applied improperly to the court for a possession order, they have a form to fill in, and they have to fill in the form that refers to the fact that you are a trespasser, and of course it's ignored. Now, a lot of people, when they get to court, they don't realize that the applications that have been made to the court actually are flawed. They're faulty, they're fraudulent. And if they got a hold of the application form, they can wave the application form in front of the judge and say, Judge, this is an application form for removal of a trespasser. I'm not a trespasser, I'm a home owner. And the bank has a remedy, and that remedy is simply to reschedule my mortgage over a longer period of time. So there's a remedy. That's the most important thing. There has to be a remedy.
Roger, Vin has made a point in the chat room that the courts seek possession and not repossession in Ireland on the documents. On the documents it will say possession rather than repossession. Is that a similar situation?
Okay, there is provision in legislation for a possession. I'll explain that, and it's a bit complicated, so I'm going to try and explain it in stages. That if you buy a house and you rent it out, you are the homeowner with a tenant, and if you are relying on the tenancy to pay the mortgage, to pay the rent in order for you to pay the mortgage, if the tenant stops paying the rent, then you can go for a possession of the property. Yeah? So you, the homeowner, can apply for possession of the property. Mm-hmm. It's your home. Now, that possession order is designed for the homeowner, not for the the mortgagee. Now, having said that, there is provision, and if you look at the rules sometimes explain it in more detail. The rules state that if you are a mortgagee, and if your homeowner, the mortgagor, has given up on the home, for example, if I rent out a property and I've been trying to get the mortgage paid by getting the rent paid, as it were, for a long period of time, I might get to the point where I say, well, to hell with this, I've just given up, there's nothing I can do, and I can then talk to the mortgagee and say, you do it, you've got bigger clout, you've got more money, I'm giving up on this. At that point, the mortgagee can apply to the courts for a possession of the home. And effectively what's going on there is the mortgagee is applying for a possession on behalf of the mortgagor. So they're doing, and if you look at the legislation, it says that the mortgagor gives possession to the mortgagee. It does not say the mortgagee takes possession from the mortgagor. It's very, very important. These single words make all the difference. So where in legislation it refers to possession, it actually is referring to the homeowner taking possession of his property where he's got a default with regards to tenancy. Mm-hmm. Now, when a mortgagee decides to take possession of the property with the if you like, the consent of the mortgagor, there's two things that the mortgagee has to do. First and foremost, he has to prove that there's a default by the tenant, and if you go through the list there, it's quite rigorous. The tenant has to do this, the tenant has to do it. So, in other words, the tenant has rights. And in fact, this is very important. When the tenant is in the property with the permission of the owner, the tenant has all the rights that the actual property owner has. When the tenant is in the property without the permission of the owner, then the only rights he has are as per his tenancy agreement or contract or common law. Now, when the mortgagee steps in to take possession of the property because the mortgagor doesn't want to do so, then the mortgagee has to make sure, the mortgagee being the bank, has to make sure that the tenant is in breach of its contract. When the court is happy that the tenant is in breach of his contract, the court then moves on to the next part of the issue as to whether or not they will grant possession. And the next part of the issue is it has to demonstrate that the mortgagor, the owner, is in default of his mortgage for 2 years. Not 2 months, 2 years. And that would indicate to the court that the home has been abandoned by the owner. So when you look at legislation, you look at the word possession and you assume that the mortgagee has the right to possess the home. No, they do not. They can only do it with the consent of the mortgagor. And that consent, if you like, is effective by virtue of the fact the mortgagor has given up on it. And this is what we've done. We actually went through this. I remember sitting here in home and having a conversation with the person that was mostly involved in, Jo, and Jo is a very clever lady, and we sat and we discussed this in detail, and Jo said, Roger, it says the mortgagee can take possession. I said, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. And for 2 hours we wrestled. And in the end, I said, read it again. And of course, in reading it again, it says the mortgagor gives possession to the mortgagee. Mm-hmm. It's a cooperative thing. The mortgagee doesn't take possession. And there it all turned. Everything turned on that. And of course, if you always go back to the principles, the common law and the principles, an Englishman's home is his castle, and an Englishman word is his bond, is absolutely what it's all about. If you borrow money, you have an obligation to pay that money back. If you draw down from the common purse, from the mutual credit of the nation, you must pay it back. If you don't pay it back because you're bloody minded or whatever, then of course somebody else in the community has a right to go to an auction and buy that property and kick you out because you don't deserve the right to live in it. We all have obligations. We all must meet our obligations, and our obligations are when we borrow money, we pay it back. But the banks have stepped in and they've hijacked our monetary system. That's what this is all about. The banks have cleverly, because, up until the internet, I've never had the chance to read legislation the way I've read it in the last 12 months. And it's been, what an eye-opener. I've learned so much by having the time to actually study the detail of legislation. And whereas previously I thought these politicians are writing this legislation to act against our best interests, lo and behold, all of a sudden, the whole thing opened up, that the legislation is there to protect us. Now, interesting enough, if you take on board the history of things, the principles of things, and you bring them together, you start to see a pattern. Now, when we looked at the 1925 Law of Property Act, we realized at that point in time that 77% of the population were actually renting. They didn't own their own property. And the government at that time wanted to encourage people to buy the homes, but so did the banks, because the banks realized that only 23% of the population owned property, and they weren't borrowing from the banks. So the banks went on a mission. The banks went on a mission to actually get more people owning their own homes, because the more people owning their own homes, the more mortgages they were providing. And if they were on this scam of attaching interest to mortgages as they were, they saw gold dust. They saw gold. And they chased this one, but they said to the banks, they said to the government, we needed protection. That's what the Law of Property Act was introduced for, to provide the protection. Now, if you move forward into the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, home ownership grew and grew and grew. And don't challenge me on my dates and my percentages here, but I think roughly in about the 60s, 50% of homes, or people owned their own homes then. So it shifted quite considerably. But in the 70s, interest rates got to 15%, and there were a lot more people defaulting on their homes, on their mortgages, because it was attached to interest rate of 15%. The rogue banks were pushing people to effective bankruptcy. And what was going on here now is, because it had not been a problem before, but more and more people were failing to pay their mortgages. So what the banks started doing was just literally kicking down doors and kicking people out. So the 1977 Criminal Law Act was introduced, and the Criminal Law Act was introduced to protect us. Section 6 is you cannot use violence to evict anybody. It's against.
Wouldn't that be covered in common law anyway, Roger?
Absolutely. The point is that the common law, the reality of common law is that if you have a home, right, then you are absolutely protected, and it does come back to this principle that Englishman's home is his castle. So what you actually have is that you do have obligations, you do make your payments, but if you owe a debt and you do not pay that debt, right, nobody can kick your door down. The remedy there is ostracization. You will be ostracized in your local community if you do not pay to somebody you owe money to. So they wouldn't trade with you, they wouldn't deal with you, they wouldn't sell you vegetables. You'd be ostracized, and you would be embarrassed, because once again, the Englishman used to be a proud, not just an Englishman, goodness sake, anybody with any common decency knows to pay off their debts.
Can I just ask you a question, Roger? You're going along like a steam train, and it's there is a lot of stuff. Now, what we're talking about here is an Englishman's home is his castle. That's a common law sort of.
It's a worldwide thing. Isn't it?
It's a worldwide, but it's a common law. People generally realise that's the case. It's accepted. Now, when we're trying to sort of get to something that's ingrained in common law, in natural law even, the problem that I think anyway is that is that we're using acts and statutes, so the two are crossing. We're getting statute and act law and common law, and we're trying to sort of intertwine them. Now,
no. Let me explain this. Statute law is primarily built on common law. So you start with the common law, and statute law is built upon it to improve it, to refine it, to make it better. Now, there's two types of statutes, right? Statute law, which is built on common law, and we must uphold it, absolutely. And then statute law, which is not built on common law. And the difference between the two is the common law is there to protect, the statute law is there to control. So you've got two different emphases. And I'll give you a good example. Down my road here, if we have driveways and we have ability to park on the road, if they did yellow lines all the way down the road, across the driveways and down the side of the road, if I parked on the double yellow lines across somebody's driveway, I'm breaching the common law, because I'm stopping somebody getting out of his home and into his home. So I'm causing a difficulty to a fellow human being. So that's a breach of the common law. If I park on the double yellow lines by the side of the road and I'm not in anybody's way, I'm breaching a statute. I'm not interfering with the traffic, I'm not interfering with my neighbours, and therefore it's purely a regulation, and invariably that regulation is designed to drive me to a parking lot where I have to pay parking fines. So there's a good example of where a statute law about double yellow lines incorporates both a common law and statute law, and basically it's common sense, isn't it? So when you look at statutes, you've got to look at statutes with the view to identifying whether there is a common law foundation to it, or whether it's just a regulatory provision to control us, okay? And there might be a whole range of ideas or examples of speeding is another one, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But let's not bog down on that. Effectively, I've always maintained that we are governed by consent, and therefore statutes are applied by our consent. That does not include the common law. We have an obligation to obey the common law because we expect the common law to protect us. And that is the essence of it all. It's about protection. In any society, in any community, we expect to be protected by the law. And therefore, there is an obligation to uphold and obey the law. And that is not statutes unless they're built on common law. So we must always go back to, we are governed by consent. We go back to the principles of we all must uphold that we are all under the law, equal under the law. And of course there's another clue there. If you look at a statute that gives a benefit to one man over another, then that's not common law, that's a statute. And again, that's a subtle difference, but an important one.
And that's the problem, though, isn't it, Roger? Because when we start getting into statute law, that's where it gets incredibly complicated.
Yes.
I mean, I've had some legal training. I've got some legal qualifications, and even myself, when you were talking earlier on about different acts and statutes and stuff like that, how are we going to get round how convoluted and complicated it is?
Well, okay. I mean, at the moment we're getting layers and layers and layers of regulation that we don't understand. I mean, the police don't understand them. The police, at the moment, the Criminal Law Act of 1977 is quite clear. It says that you cannot use force to enter somebody's property unless it's lawful, unless there's a lawful provision. That lawful provision is if you're a trespasser. Okay, there's no other provision. Everything else is excluded. So what you have is you've got the banks are applying to the courts for a repossession order, and they're being granted fraudulently, and when the police turn up an eviction, they think that the banks have a right to kick people's doors down. All you've got to do is show them the legislation that prevents it. It was written to prevent exactly what the banks were doing. The police don't understand it. So coming back to the point of your question or the comment you made, which was that legislation is now far too complicated to understand. Absolutely, but principles are not difficult to understand. Principles are simple, and if we always revert to the principles, do unto others, etc., etc. You can't go far wrong, even down to simple things like parking and speeding. Look, if I'm doing 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone in the middle of the morning when the kids are going to school, look, I should have my car crushed, if not parts of my body, but let's not go there. If I'm driving at 40 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's not a leaf on the road, then I believe that I'm justified in doing so because I'm acting reasonably. That's the common law, that's the common sense, that's logic. And I think what we have to do is always revert to common sense and logic to understand what the law is. All of the legislation, nitpicking legislation, is there, if you like, a refinement, but remember this, the vast majority of legislation that's being introduced is a control tool. You know, it's under the guise of health and safety or some other nonsense, but invariably it's about controlling us. We do not have to be controlled if we do not want to be controlled, and therefore we do have a right to withdraw our consent to being governed, and that I believe is part of what we must do, but that does not give us the right to disobey the law. And I think, you know, making the distinction is very, very important indeed.
So, when you talk to people, regular people who have jobs, people who've got absolutely no idea that there's anything other than EastEnders, and there's X Factor and what have you. When you speak to those, how do you try to explain, what the problem is and how we can solve it?
Well, I suppose the way I approach it mostly is I ask questions, and if people, our problem is that our knowledge base is so vast based on their knowledge base, because we study this, we live it, we breathe it, we're involved in it, we have a sense of it, we understand the injustices that are being put upon us by the New World Order. The vast majority of people don't get the sense, and they don't see what's wrong because they don't see what's coming. So we have an understanding of we've got to get it more involved because there's more coming at us. You know, we're standing on the train line, looking towards the train, and we know the train is coming. They're standing on the train line, looking at us, looking the other way, and don't see the train. So unfortunately, we are of the characteristics of we are lecturing people, and when you lecture people, they don't listen. So my approach is more to ask questions. And often asking a question gets you engaged in a conversation because people like to feel they've got an opinion about things. And I think that one of the best questions you can ask somebody is, could you tell me who on this planet can tell you what to do without your consent? It's the simplest question on the planet, and most people can't answer it. And that gets them thinking. And when they actually do come to the conclusion, which they always do, well, nobody, you say, well, why are you running through these hoops? Because people tell you what to do. And, there's an element of logic and reason and common sense that gets them engaged in the conversation, and from there you can take it forward. I mean, it's the other one, do you know where money comes from? Yeah. And I had a fantastic occasion when I was in one of these cafes in early hours of the morning, and a young guy was there, and we threw the question at him, where does money come from? And he goes, oh, I know this. Oh, hang on, I know this. I know this one. He was quite excited because he actually knew the answer. And he said, oh, they'd just make it up. And of course, he did have the right answer, but he didn't have the reasoning, he didn't have the logic. And it's a bit like when you talk to people and you explain, well, the money supply belongs to the nation. They say, well, hang on a minute, I've got 50 quid in my bank account. That doesn't belong to the nation, that's mine. You've got to go through a process of explaining the creation of all money. It has to be done by somebody. At the beginning of time, we have Adam, we have Eve, and we have the snake and the apple. There isn't any money, right? So that somebody somewhere has created the money, right? Who had the right to do so? So you've got to go through that process, and then you go through the explanation of, well, also 100 years ago there was X amount of money in circulation, and now there is X multiplied by 1,000. So there's a lot more money in circulation today than there was then. Where did it come from? You ask those questions, and they engage with you because they want to know the answers. So you draw them into a conversation about, the basics, and then from
there you can take them where they will go. Now, unfortunately, we interlace a lot of our knowledge with a lot of peripheral stuff. When I say peripheral, I'm saying that, you know, our knowledge base is extensive because we know about the geoengineering, we know a lot about other stuff, and you know, our habit is to sort of, well, whilst this person is listening to me, I'm going to throw the rest of it at them as well, at which point they glaze over and away they go. So I think that what's important, and again, this is the conference, the essence of the conference is to focus on a very, very important point. Every man and woman on this planet is affected by the monetary system. Everybody is paying, because I think the figure is quoted, there was an independent research, was that 50% of everything we buy is as a consequence of interest. That means that when I go and buy a car, half of the value of it is as a consequence of interest that goes to the banks. Yeah. And if we were to take interest out, and remember, all religions said that usury was sinful, and you know that a Jew won't lend to a Jew with interest. Muslims say that interest is wrong, and the Christians used to say that usury was sinful as well. But we seem to have pushed that one to one side, and we now are paying interest to the bankers. So, you know, we've got to go back to basics. We started to rediscover what's right and what's wrong, in essence. But also at the conference, we want to get across to people is that we want you to focus on what affects everybody, the money. Now, if you say to a student, do you know the interest on your student loan is unlawful? They listen. If you say to a mother in the street, do you realize that your credit card, the interest on your credit card is unlawful? They listen. Mortgages, they listen. Business loans, business people say, whoa, my business is struggling. And we say, do you realize you could double your profits if you didn't have to pay interest on your business loans? They say, well, how am I going to do that? And of course, that's the other part of the conference, is the platform. We have developed a platform, an alternative monetary system, a payment platform. And if we stop paying into the banks, we are going to collapse the banking system. Therefore, we can't do it until we have got a replacement. So that's why my emphasis has been on lawful bank, is TAMS, the alternative monetary system, is creating an alternative so that we can actually start paying each other using a platform. There's already a platform out there, PayPal. The problem with PayPal is it ties in with the national currencies. We need our own currency. And again, I've established sovereignties, which is our currency. It's a currency that's owned by each and every one of us, because each and every one of us is entitled to sign our own IOUs. And you know, I do an example, at least do an analogy, which I will be doing at the conference, which explains two things. When you arrive on an island, and there's 1,000 people arrive on the island, and you explore the island and you discover you're the only human beings there now, but it's actually got everything you need. It's got the cows and the chickens, the sheep, the trees, the hills, the water, everything. And all you have to do is organize the community now around building the houses, tapping into the water supply, and so on and so forth. That can be done providing everybody makes a contribution, and everybody, you know, mucks in and does what they're skilled at. Some people look after the children, some people would teach the children, some people would cut down the trees, some people would build the houses, and so on and so forth. The point is, there would be no money, and there would be no need for money until human nature kicks in. And when human nature kicks in, you find that some people are bloody lazy, and they're sunning themselves on the island and not doing their work. That's when you need a measurement of account, or at least a medium of exchange, because the medium exchange provides for hard workers to benefit and the lazy buggers not to.
Yeah. Getting back to the conference, Roger, what sort of itinerary have you got? I mean, have you got any details of what's going to be happening on the day and what times and stuff?
Okay, well, we start properly at 10 o'clock. We're dividing the conference into 4 sections. I'm talking all the way through, and it's subject matter. It's not about who's doing the talking, I will be talking on all the subjects, and we want to talk about justification. We want to explain to people about the law. We want to explain to people about the money and the banking. We want to explain to people
who's committing the crimes, as it were, because it is criminal. It's the bankers, the history of the bankers, what they've done, etc. So people have an understanding of what's been going on. We then go on to explain what the alternative monetary system is about, how you can create your own monetary system, how you can issue to yourself money and spend it, subject to being able to pay it back, and so on and so forth, how you can create an interest-free mortgage based on the new platform, the new monetary system, and so on and so forth. So each segment, it's a bit like that. To understand what we understand, it's like looking at a picture. You can see the picture. But if you break that picture down into a jigsaw, you see component parts of that picture, and you may see something on the jigsaw that you might understand, but that doesn't mean you see the whole picture. So the conference is designed to bring those pieces together, explain each piece of the jigsaw, and progressively during the course of the day to bring them together, so at the end of it, people will see the picture. Now, my focus is on explaining it as though the people at the conference don't know anything about any of this. In other words, ordinary people. I'll be approaching the unions because one of the things I do talk about is austerity. I call austerity the clever deception, and it is a trick, because this is a very important point. If I ask most people, what's good for the country, a deficit or a surplus? What's your answer? Jason, Andy, what's the best, deficit or a surplus?
Surplus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who's that, Jason?
Jason, yeah.
Yeah, and Andy, what would your instincts be?
No,
surplus?
I'd go with Jason.
Okay. Everybody would. There's not a single person that hasn't been, if you like, convinced that the government should make a surplus. Wrong. And this is the point. We just do not understand the basic formats. The country's money, right, is put into circulation by spending. So the more money that the government spends into circulation, right, the bigger the deficit. Now, the money is a tool. It's not a debt. So what should happen is the government say, right, we're going to create a £1 trillion, and I'm going to spend it into circulation, and it will circulate. They don't have to take it out again. They should put it into circulation so commerce can use it. So what should actually happen is I mean, if we go back to our Ireland analogy, we say to everybody, look, some people are skiving, some people are working hard, so what we're going to do is we're going to create money. And we're going to give 1,000 units to everybody in the island, and you spend it to buy the goods, and you earn it. So at the end of the month, the people with the money have worked, and the people without the money haven't worked. So it's a medium of exchange designed to make an economy function. So what the government should do is create the money, spend it into circulation, and effectively keep it into circulation. Now, taxation is not designed to pay for the services of the community. The taxes are designed to readjust the services. So if you're putting too much money into one area, then by taxing the people, the money comes back to the government and they can adjust it to spend it elsewhere. So a surplus is bad, because when the government takes more money out of circulation than it puts in, it is taking money away from commerce. And of course, when there's less money in circulation, the economy goes down. So that's the point. Now, when the government takes money out of circulation, it takes more than it puts in, the surplus, the banks step in and lend the money. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to change our understanding of what money is. Now, people think that a government is like a business, but it's not. And the difference is the governments have the right to issue money. Businesses don't. So we've got to stop treating governments like a business and treat them as what they are, a government to provide a service to the people, right? So we, the people, will agree that the government can issue our money and issue it in a quantity that suits our requirement, and through taxation take it back out again and control the distribution so that everybody gets a fair slice of the cake. Now, what's been happening, of course, is that the banks have hijacked the monetary system. They've taken the actual money supply, and they're pretending that it's theirs. They've stolen it. They've stolen our money supply. And the cheeky buggers are actually renting it to us at interest. And of course, what happens then is that because we are involved in buying homes, etc., they're basically stealing our labours from us. Now, if you readjust your thinking processes to this fact that every year we have a deficit. All that means is the government has put more money into circulation than taken out, which is good. So a deficit is good. A deficit means the government has put more money to work into the community. Now, if you take every single deficit for the last 50 years, that adds up to what? It's the national debt, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So the national debt is not a debt at all. It's the nation's money supply. And it never needs to be paid back. And yet we are paying £50 billion a year to the bankers to use our own money supply. It's absolute roguery.
Completely outrageous.
It is outrageous. And the thing is that once we get it, once we understand it, once we actually, whoa, hang on a minute. You mean I'm entitled to actually draw down mutual credit? Remember, it's your credit rating, right? You have an entitlement to draw down from mutual credit of the nation. Yeah, there's three types of credit. There's private credit. That's when I lend to you. I give you. You come into my shop, my timber yard, and you say, let me give you an analogy. It's a good little analogy. Imagine that you have a design for a dog kennel, and you do a drawing, and you go around to your local community and say, here, I've designed this dog kennel. Will you buy one from me for 100 units or £100? And you sell 100 units. But you don't actually have any money. All you've got is a drawing. So you go to your local timber yard and you say to the owner, look, I've sold 100 of these units. Would you give me the timber to build the dog houses? Now, the timber guy would say, okay, well, that's not a lot of money from my perspective. Fine. Gives you the timber, you build the dog houses, you sell them to the dog owners. You go back to the timber yard guy and you say, there you go, there's your money back. Thank you very much. Good doing business with you. That's private credit. Now, supposing you put your dog houses on the internet and you sold 1,000 dog houses. Whoa, fantastic business to be in, right? You go back to the timber merchant and you say, will you lend me the timber, or would you provide me with the timber for building 1,000 of these dog houses? Now, the timber merchant would then say, well, that's beyond my capacity. That could put me in trouble. Supposing you made a cock-up, you died or something, I wouldn't get my money back. So, no, I can't do that. But I know 9 other timber merchants who would help. So 10 building merchants or timber merchants would come together, and collectively they would provide you with the timber on credit. That's what we call mutual credit, right? So you've got a collective credit. And then you've got universal credit, which is what we're talking about, the credit of the nation. What happens is that you are now building dog houses, 1,000 a month or whatever the figure is, and you go back to the 10 timber merchants and you say, more timber guys, and they say, this is beyond us, this is lovely business, but we just could not afford the risk, because you could employ people who build lousy dog houses and not be able to sell them, and then we're all in the whatever. So what would happen is you would then go to the whole community and say, look, all of this business is benefiting the local community. The shops are benefiting, the unemployed guys have got jobs, everybody's better off. We don't want to lose this to the village up the road there. So why doesn't the whole community guarantee the actual payment of the timber? So if anything goes wrong, we all absorb the cost. Now, that's what happens with a nation state. The whole community acts as sponsor or guarantor to commerce, because everybody benefits from commerce. So what we've done is we've actually created a system of money. We actually have the money in operation, and we have allowed the banks to provide the service of monitoring commerce. But unfortunately, the banks are crooks, and they've hijacked it, and they've stolen our money, and we didn't know. We were asleep on the job. Now we know. At the conference, we explain all of this, and we say to people, look, what are we going to do about it? We know these people are crooks. We know they've ripped us off. We know that the parliamentarians aren't doing anything about it. Whether it's ignorance or whether it's collusion, it's not for us to say, right? We don't even have to prove it. I started by saying we need a class action against the banks, and I thought, look, we're not going to win in the courts because they bought the bloody judges. We've got a brown envelope judiciary in operation here, and we're not going to win. So we've got to use tactic. It's about strategy, it's about tactic, it's about justification. We can justify what we're doing because we're bloody right. We can justify our actions because it's our money. But having justified it, we've got to use a mechanism, and that's why we need an alternative platform. We need a monetary system. We need the justification. The law is on our side. And here's another point. If you stop paying your mortgage, what's the bank going to do about it? Because I can tell you now, there is no provision in legislation for a mortgagee to take possession of a mortgagee's home. None. Now that we know that, now that we know the law's on our side, now that we know the legislation's been written to protect us, we can act upon it. So when the policeman comes down, we can contact the chief. Now that's the other point, of course, is we've got to deal with the chief constables and the judges and whoever who are working together, right, to oppress us, the bankers, the judiciary, etc. Not all the judges. I'm very careful about that. Not all the judges. There's still some good judges out there. It's just as hard to find them. So the bottom line is that we have a mechanism now. We have a mechanism by which we can actually challenge the banks. We can stop paying our mortgage, and they've got no provision to actually repossess our homes. We're setting up what we call Home Guard. There'll be about 20 or 30 guys there who are signed up to the Home Guard, and the Home Guard will use SMS messages. If a bailiff turns up to your house to evict you for a mortgage issue, they will come and they will inform the bailiffs of the law. They're dressed, they're properly dressed, they're informed about the law, and they will simply tell to the bailiffs, you're breaking the law, you're not allowed to make an entry, it's against the law. The Criminal Law Act 1977, Section 6, you cannot enter a property violently unless there's lawful provision, and the only lawful provision there is in legislation is if you're removing a trespasser. It's as simple as that. And it's been there in front of us. It just takes a bit of time and energy to investigate the reality of the situation, bring the pieces together, and come up with a conclusion. So the banks will not be able to repossess or take possession of homes because it's against the law. The banks still have provision for rescheduling our loans, and that's the first thing they should do. And when they reschedule the loans, we'll be negotiating on behalf of everybody who signed up to our action. And, of course, renegotiation of the loans will not include interest, will it? Because they have no entitlement to interest. So in most cases, the banks will owe us, not the other way around. So we have provision for, we will set up an escrow account. We'll ask people to pay into the escrow account. And what we'll be using is an alternative payment platform, so they won't be able to steal the money by securing the money in their account. It will be somewhere else.
Sorry, Roger. Can I ask you? Now, this is all going to be revealed at the conference, all the details and all the stuff. Now, we know that there's been quite a few instances where people have gone up against the banks. I mean, Guy Taylor's one example. Tom Crawford's another example. What these cases seem to do is they seem to polarise people. So you will get people that personally I have absolutely no idea why anybody would want to sort of diss what somebody else is saying. You know, if you don't like something what somebody's saying, then you just don't listen and you move on. I mean, that's what I do. I don't. So, but what happens is huge division and different sides seem to be brought up in each individual case, and you have people one side naysayers saying one thing, and then you've got the people that are believing it. How do you intend to respond to that sort of criticism?
Well, okay. I mean, let's deal with this movement, the free man movement and the truth movement. They've all come from a position of ignorance and growing knowledge, and everyone has different opinions about what they're learning. So you're going to get conflict because of interpretation. It doesn't mean anybody is wrong. And if you like, the conflict that we've seen has been based on ignorance, on our ignorance. That will find its way through the eventually we'll find our way through that problem. The other thing is reason, okay, is that you must always base your arguments on reason. And the third thing is the law. The law is there. Actually, it's black and white. It tells you. So whereas we've not previously understood the law, now we understand it. Now we know the law is there to protect us, and we can show it. That's what it says. It says in black and white that they cannot do this, and we can follow it through. We know that the courts don't work for us, and that therefore we're entitled not to actually go into the courts. We're entitled to do this the common law way, which is our way.
by not paying our mortgage. Now, your observation, which I agree, is that if you go into a room and there's a bully, right, that most people will cower to the bully. That is human nature. But one or two people will stand up, and of course they will get smacked round the ear, and everyone else will stand around saying, "Well, told you so. You shouldn't have challenged the bully." But when there's enough of us, right, when there's enough of us with the to do so, we can defeat the bully. And when a small group of us actually take on the bully, and the bully knows that they were going to lose, that's when the rest of the people will come on board. So we need the weight of numbers, we need enough people to do it, and we need enough people to challenge them. But here's the other thing, here's another very important thing. If you've got a movement, a mass action that's going to stop paying the banks, you don't do it on Friday. You actually tell people you're going to do it sometime in the future. But you're not going to tell them when, you're just going to say, when our numbers are big enough. At some day in the future, we are all going to stop paying the banks. Now, the banks are saying, whoa, hang on a minute, this could be nasty, because that could cause us massive cash flows. Understanding this, if you've got an alternative system in which trade can continue to flourish without their system, it really makes them focus. And what they're going to be saying is, we wonder how big this movement is. Is it 100 people? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people? Is it 1 million people? When it gets to a certain figure, you can't lose. Because all you've got to do is that 1 million people are guaranteed to drag in the rest, because there's such a benefit attached to it. And there are other benefits. Alternative monetary systems can provide a lot of other benefits. But here's the most important point. If you have shares in a bank, what are you going to do? You're going to get rid of them, aren't you?
Of course.
And of course, the threat of action is going to make them sweat. They don't know how many we are. What they do know is it's a very popular action. We're appealing to the court of public opinion, not the bent courts, the county courts or whatever. So there's a strategy here, there's a process here. There is enough of us now that understand what's going on behind the scenes to actually give weight and credibility to what we're going to do. All we've got to do is start working on a plan of action that we can all coordinate and agree with, and that's what I'm proposing. So the conference is focusing on the money. It's not focusing on all of the other issues. We've been there, we've done that, we understand all about the chemtrails, etc. We don't need to fog their minds. We need to focus on something we can prove. And this is another important point. I can stand on the stage and I can speak to people for 1 hour, and at the end of that 1 hour, I can convince them that the banks are crooks. Now, when you are being robbed by the banks, and when you are then being invited to make or take an action, right, in the future, why wouldn't you do it? Now, there's something that happens in community. You get a feeling, don't you? You just get a feeling that we're starting to make some progress. I get a feeling in my bones that we're actually starting to make progress. I talk to people, and I talk to a lot of people, and I'm absolutely staggered how many people say the same thing. The banks are crooks, right? We are pushing at open doors. We are not trying to convince people that the banks are crooks. They already know it. All we've got to do is convince them what to do. And I believe that that's what we're going to do at the conference. We are going to convince them that what we're going to do is the right thing to do. And you know what? It's the only thing we can do. There is no options. You say about Guy Taylor, people, an enormous amount of admiration for people like Guy Taylor who stand up to the system, and he's lost all his properties at this point in time. He will get them back, of course, but he was prepared to make that sacrifice. I have an enormous amount of admiration for people who are prepared to stand up to these crooks and do what they're destined to do. Good on them. So, I believe that we've got to the point now where we are going to get the support. The free man, the truth movement, I believe, will come together and put weight behind this action.
Well, I applaud anybody that stands up and fights against the big fellas and for what's right. And so the point I was making is that it does have, especially the Peter of England did the We Re Bank. Now, I've not heard from that in a while. I don't know what's going on with it, but I do know that there were two very definite sides of the same coin that were sort of like some saying, this is great and this is working and we're doing all this, and then there was other people with differing opinions and differing evidence that they were showing as well. So, my point was just the division that it causes, and I just wondered if you had some sort of strategy for that, or whether you were just sort of going to, try to just do your thing.
Well, okay. I mean, the strategy I adopt is to be plausible and reasonable, and to provide a way of moving forward that doesn't actually require that anybody do something at this point in time, but do something in the future. Now, we will know. I mean, the people who are helping me to build this action, we will know how many people that we've got, right? We're the only people who will know how many we've got. We also have a very strong indication of what's happening on the ground, because at the same time we're asking people to set up their own local branches, local mini banks, because they're the banks that are going to take over operating a banking system. So we will know. We will have the enthusiasm. I know when I go to a conference hall, the mood in the conference hall, what's going on there by the questions. And I know that fundamentally most people out there now are just waiting for something to happen, because the economy, the banking system, everybody knows it's wrong. There's something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Roger, I've listened very carefully to what you've been saying, and to me it all seems to boil down to something quite fundamental, and something which my colleague Tony Hurst has been telling me for quite a time now. He said there's one thing we really need, and we all need it before we can move forward, and that is to know who we are and to understand about personal sovereignty.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. Your entitlement to sign an IOU for your benefit, conditional upon you paying it back. It's your honour. It's absolutely right. It is fundamental. Go back to basics. If you do the right thing by your fellow man, he will do the right thing by you. And that's fundamentally what this is all about. Mm-hmm. We have fed greed for so long that it's me. It's even changed. I get so annoyed when people say, me and my sister. No, it's not me and my sister. It's my sister and I. You put other people ahead of you. You put them to the front. That's what the language does. It actually says, my sister and I, meaning my sister is more important than me. It's the fundamental principle, is you put your fellow person before yourself, and it will come back to you in abundance. If you do the right thing. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to refocus people's minds on what they should be doing. They should be living their lives, not working their lives. We have a system that enslaves us because of the bloody interest. If 50% of everything I buy, if everything I buy is 50% more expensive, that means I'm working 2 days longer than I should. So I should be working 3 days a week. I should be giving 1 day to charity, and I should have 3 with my family. Yeah, and that seems to me the way of the future is to work less, to live longer, live my life fuller, and spend more time with my friends and my family, and stop chasing the money, because I don't need the money. I need to be able to put some food on my table every day. I need a nice house, a decent car. That's what I need. I don't need to save for my pension, because the money in circulation, the government can put money into circulation based on the resource of the working people, and we can all make a contribution. Going back to the island, if everybody makes a contribution, everybody has available to them what they need, right? If you've got a house, why do you need to build a second house to rent to somebody else? Because they have the provision to build their own house. So it becomes a nonsense. The whole system is flawed. It needs to be restructured, and it needs to be restructured at the basic level of a payment platform.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even if you ignore the prospect of technology that's out there that takes away from dependence on fossil fuels, we still have quite a level of technology in our society today. But the problem is, to me, that technology is not used for the good of all. That's exactly right. That's one of the problems. I mean, you go back 100 years, 70% of the revenues of a business used to transfer to wages, and 30% used to go back to capital.
It's now the other way around. So what you've got is you've got a system in which 70% of the money that flows through business goes to capital, which means capital is getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, and the labour, the employment side is getting poorer and poorer and poorer. That can't continue. That's why the poverty exists. The whole monetary system is flawed, and we should have a positive liquidity system. We do not have a positive liquidity system. We have a debt system. And here's a very interesting point when you think about it, right? Every single pound in circulation is in circulation because of debt. Somebody borrowed it, the banks lent it to them, and they spent it into circulation. So every single pound in circulation is there because of a debt. So if you've got £1 million in your bank, somebody somewhere else, or collectively, owe £1 million. So if you've got £10 million, then a collection of people owe 10 million. You don't have a single penny that's not accounted for within that scenario. So you think, whoa, hang on a minute. So a billionaire has got X number of people chasing a debt of £1 billion. Now, how much money can a billionaire spend? I mean, I'll give him a good shot at 500 quid a week, right? So the £1 billion he's got in his bank account keeps people in poverty. It's a nonsense. Now, I'm not anti-wealth. Look, if you want £1 billion, fine. But you can only have it on a positive liquidity system. Now, a positive liquidity system means there's money in circulation without debt. That's the difference. So you're not slaving away. If you want to go and accumulate money, not at the expense of debt, that's fine. Best of luck to you. Work your guts off and work yourself to an early grave. Why don't you, slack off a bit and go and live your life? Why don't you just relax and live your life a bit more? So I believe that what we want to get across is we want to start re-educating people to the monetary system. That's what this conference is all about. It's about explaining to people austerity is a scam. Austerity is one of the cleverest scams on the planet, and yet everybody believes that it's essential because we must get the deficit down. No, we don't. We want to increase the deficit. We want to double the wages of the public servants because they're doing a good job. A nurse should be paid, 50 grand a year. So should a policeman and so should a teacher. And guess what? They can earn that money without it costing us a penny because we just increase it into circulation. And of course, some people will pipe up, oh, it'll cause inflation. Again, we've been fed bullshit. It's not, excuse my language. We have been fed a lie, we believe that lie, we regurgitate that lie, and we're all misinformed as a consequence. Inflation is only caused when it's through bad distribution of the money. So I'll give you an example, right? If you have 100 houses and you have 100 people and they have £100, a house is worth £100. But if you double the amount of money in circulation and you halve the number of houses, those houses will increase in price. So the price of a product is directly related to the supply and demand and the amount of money in circulation. So all you need to do is make sure the production keeps up with the demand, and therefore you don't get inflation. So if you've got inflation in a sector in the economy, all you need to do is tax one sector of the economy to pull the money back in and redistribute it by spending it to the other area of the economy. So it's about understanding the economics of a monetary system. It's about understanding the economy. Here's a good point, right? If you imagine, just take one business, and let's assume that one business does everything. It provides the services, it does it builds everything, it provides everything. We'll call that business the economy, yeah? Now, this business called the economy employs everybody, yeah? So all the money that the economy makes goes to the wages. Now, these people will take the wages from the economy, and the economy, remember, must provide for the cost of goods and the profit. So if all the money is paid to the workers, they are then expected to buy the goods that are made by the economy. They're never going to have enough money to buy all the goods, are they? Because the economy must make a profit, and if the economy provides all the wages of the consumers are never going to have enough money to buy the products made by the economy. So, where does the money come from? There's two ways that money can be provided. One, it can be provided by a universal income. In other words, the money is created, it's handed out to the people, and then they can buy the products that the economy makes, or debt. And of course, the system we've got at the moment is debt. So the whole economic system itself is flawed because it's a debt-based system. It's not a positive liquidity system.
So would you say then that if I mean the governments are always talking about wealth creation and creating wealth, and they have this job makers, don't they? This sort of thing. So what you're saying is that wealth creation is based on debt, really? I mean, there has to be enough debt for that wealth to be created.
Yeah, absolutely. In a debt system, in order for somebody to be wealthy, somebody else must be poor. For somebody to be super wealthy, somebody else has to be super poor. So the debt-based system creates poverty. A positive liquidity system does not create poverty. It actually removes poverty just like that. So it's about the distribution of the resources more than anything else. And resources, all resources are available to all of us, except, of course, what we've done is we've had the lunacy. I can never get my head around how we've allowed a private corporation to take control of the water and they're selling it back, our own water. You know, to me, the water comes from the sky. It's our bloody water. Fine, it's cleaned up. That's no problem there. But it takes so few people to clean up the water through filtration or whatever. And the bottom line is that we are being ripped off big time by corporations. And every time we are paying a corporation a massive amount of money, somebody somewhere is being impoverished. Now, I might be a clever guy, and I might be able to go and get a good job and earn £50,000 a year, and I'm all right, Jack. But somewhere down the road, someone is not all right, Jack, because he doesn't have the same capabilities as I've got. Okay? So what happens is he's on the treadmill. He's struggling to make ends meet. His family don't get the same benefits that I got. It's not right. And I'm not disadvantaged. I've got my house, I've got my car, I've got my food, I've got my holidays, and I've got money in the bank. Whilst the money is in the bank, somebody else is losing out, because every pound that's held in an account as a positive thing, someone else has got a debt, because that's a debt-based system. So what I need to do is I need to say, whoa, I'm going to spend my money. I'm not going to save my money, I'm going to spend it. So saving is bad. Right? You don't have to save up for your future. You just spend for today, because your future, right? If you work until you're 65, everybody else is producing enough for you to get the benefit of, and money is put into circulation to produce products, not to save in bank accounts. And there's another important point: the money that you put into the bank account is actually not there. The banks grab it and they invest in speculation, and lo and behold, the more money you save, the more speculation there is, and that's what forces your oil prices up, and your food prices up, and your coffee prices up. Mm-hmm. The more you save, the more you pay for the goods and services that you get. So once again, saving is bad. Take your money out of the bank and spend it. Now, the more money you're spending, the more money moving through circulation, the more employment there is. So the guy down the road all of a sudden has got a job. His family is getting more, right, because I'm no longer saving. So we've got the wrong end of the stick, guys. We really don't understand economy. We don't understand money. We don't understand the principles, the basic principles about the law. We've lost sight of reality. We've lost sight of what we should be doing to enjoy our lives.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Roger. We've got a question from Lee that I think quite a fascinating one. He says, so, Roger, the new system, will we be using redeemable notes and paper, or do we transcend to a digital accounting system for this credit transaction?
Well, okay, I mean, I would prefer a digital system, but there's nothing wrong in having both. A digital system provides for a transfer tax, which is the way in which we could draw money back out, and also a digital system allows for it prevents fraud. It stops people stealing from our bank accounts. There's so many good things about a digital system, but I know that people, like the feel of money, and some people don't trust the people behind the system, and so on and so forth. So a digital system conditional upon it being based on a constitution. A digital system based on some democratic format. A digital system that provides that, cards, technology, everything's taken advantage of. But if people want paper money, there's no reason why we couldn't have that. In fact, I would encourage paper money to start with, because paper money is a good marketing tool. It provides a mechanism by which people can understand, because they feel touchy, they get a feeling that this currency now is in circulation. I can go into a shoe shop and I can buy with a new currency, and it works. They then start to accept the digital side of things. Yeah, I hope that answers Lee's question.
Yeah, well, it does, I think, but he's quite concerned about the safety of digital money because...
well, that's a bit of an illusion if you've got one system, because you can't steal digital money if you've got one system. If you have you see, the problem we've got at the moment is we've got 10 banks with 10 systems, right? And you can steal money from one bank and transfer it to another bank, yeah? Mm-hmm. So if you've got one digital system, you can't steal money because you can trace it. And as long as you've got a constitution and a common law a mechanism to actually, if you like, draw back the money, there's not a problem. If Lee's talking about the electronics of it all and it breaking down, absolutely, life's like that. Some things go wrong. But if he's worried about the fraud aspect of it, you don't have to worry about that. With a single system controlled by a constitution, then all money is traceable.
Do you think that this system that you're talking about, this system that you're promoting here, do you think that would be able to be implemented in the current political system, or do you think the entire political system would need an overhaul, particularly the way that parties are funded?
It's got nothing to do with politics at all, and that's the beauty about it all. We can set up a payment platform tomorrow. We just need a reasonable number of people to do so. And that's my proposal, is that we set up a payment platform and we build a monetary system back on the payment platform. Here's how it would work, okay? You start by this. You put £100 into your local branch. Yeah? They will then give you digitally 100 units to trade with. You then go, just like PayPal, you go online and you pay to somebody else who's within the system. Now, we have to build a number of people within the system. This is where the marketing idea, this is what Challenge the Bank is about getting the message out there. You would then transfer in our system, our sovereignties, a new currency, a new system, and it is not connected to their system. So they can't meddle with it, they can't interfere with it. You would then send money to somebody across the country, and that somebody across the country can either send that money around the system in sovereignties to somebody else, or cash it up in pounds sterling by going to their local branch and literally taking the cash out if they want to. So the system actually provides for two systems that work alongside each other but do not communicate with each other. So there's a mechanism by which they can work in parallel but at the same time not together. It's very, very important that they should not work together, because if you attach our system to their system, they will destroy it. They will actually bring it down.
I see. Lee's come back on your answer there, and he says, can you ask Roger, when the lights go out and let's say a military power decides to throw an EMP, into electromagnetic pulse, into your digital credit system, do you have a backup or an analogue you can return to? Do you not see the flaw in digital banking?
Yeah, now I see what he's getting at, and I absolutely agree. So everything has to be backed up. Look, there has to be a physical, almost a book system to actually, if you like, provide. Because the old banking system was this. A banking system is a set of ledgers, it's a set of books. That's all it is. It's a record of who owes and who is owed. That's what a banking system is. If you are in commerce, you use a bank to put your money in, and therefore you can rely on the bank to give you your money to go and do business with somebody else. So a banking system is a system of ledgers. Right. So if we're going to assume, for example, that somebody has decided to stay on their side, which would be a damn stupid decision, quite frankly, and not come on our side, and if they've got one of these machines that zaps my computer and therefore I can't tell you how much you owe, I must have a backup manual system, or I must have paper currency. So yeah, there is provision. But, and there's another big but here, if I'm no longer working for the money, if I'm working for the community, I'm working for the benefit of mankind, and I'm not being, unrealistic here. I'm not being fanciful here. I'm just saying, look, I just want to get up in the morning. I'm happy to go and do a job. I'm happy to talk to my neighbours about, going collecting vegetables or making vegetables, whatever. I'm happy to make a commitment to the community, subject to me being able to access the resources that I need. I don't actually need a monetary system, but a monetary system is helpful because some people are lazy and some people are industrious. So, yeah, answering Lee's question is, I'm aware of the threat. I believe that we will move beyond the threat, because I believe at some point in the future, the powers that be operating behind the scene will realize the game is up. And they are well advised to step back and don't mess with the people.
Brilliant answer. I think that answers Lee's question. And mine as well, yeah. So you're talking about this working alongside. Sorry, I misunderstood you. See, I thought you were talking about taking the entire banking system and changing it sort of like overnight type thing.
No.
Which is why I brought the politics into it.
Mm. No, well, of course you can't win against their system. You can't do that. You can't take over the system. What you do is you make your own system work, and you tell people that the other system is crook. And you show by doing that you can actually provide money for businesses, interest-free, and their business will expand. I mean, it's like I could give credit. I can today give credit to somebody, and I would demonstrate that the way I can give credit is by providing them with a product or something which they can then use. And I can demonstrate. I will demonstrate at the conference exactly how an alternative monetary system operates in parallel with the existing system, and slowly takes over from the existing system. And there's nothing they can do about it, because they can't stop me signing an IOU. They can't stop you accepting my IOU. They can't stop us creating our own monetary system. All we've got to do is use logic and reason to present to people why our monetary system is better than theirs, and use it.
That's fabulous, Roger. I mean, yes, you don't need to set up a system that's going to, day one, bring the big banks down.
Exactly.
But if you set up a system that's fair and equitable, and people realise that, wow, this is a lot better way to live your life.
It's a process, isn't it?
They're going to migrate, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I heard, this sounds pretty similar to something that I heard you talking about. I think it was in 2012. I went to Stoke for the British Constitution Group conference, and you were talking there about the lawful bank.
Yes.
And what's the difference between this and that? Sorry.
There is the lawful bank. That's the same principle. The timing is right. You know, the lawful bank has been many years in the making, and it's never been right, because we've been so engaged in fighting the system. We've been so engaged in arguing. We've been so engaged in, trying to wake people up. We've been so engaged in doing that. We've not had the energy and the focus to actually get on with creating, and it's been enormously frustrating for me, because I've been going around for crying out loud, people, would you just realise that if the problem is a banking system, the solution is a banking system. I have written up a document that is the alternative system. All we've got to do is implement it. This is what the conference is all about. Look, guys, we've been doing this for a number of years now. Let's get on with it. The solution is our own money and banking system. Let's get on and do it.
I absolutely agree, Roger, and I hope you'll find that on the 13th of February, pretty much all the team members, except perhaps one of the Raconteurs news team, will be over there, and we'll be finding out what you've got to say, and hopefully we'll be able to support you. Time has whizzed by, as usually does. 2 hours is never long enough for guests such as yourself. We've got a couple of minutes remaining. Would you like to just reiterate the details of the conference and give any links out to websites or videos that you've got out there that people can find out any details on, please?
Okay. Well, I mean, we've titled the conference "Mass Action Against the Banks," and the whole idea is to start, if you like, stop paying money to the banks, not unilaterally, but as a large number of people, a mass of people. The conference is in Liverpool. It's at the Liner Hotel. It's on the 13th of February, and that's a Saturday. If you go to our website, thebcgroup.org.uk, tickets are £20. The £20 is being used, A, to pay for the venue, B, it's being used to pay for the platform, the monetary platform, and tickets and everything else. The brochures, I've done 10,000 leaflets, etc., etc. So it's being reinvested into building the system. The time it starts is 10 o'clock. It runs from 10 to 5.
It's a full day. I guarantee it'll be the best £20 that everybody spends, because you're going to come away knowing stuff that you didn't know before. Despite all the information out there in the freedom movement and the True Man movement, there is stuff that they haven't heard before. And more importantly, this is an opportunity to build the momentum. I think we've been doing this long enough, guys. We now need to come together, work as a team, and make this thing happen. We've got the knowledge, we've got the incentive, we've got the justification. We just need to put it in action now. So 13th of February, Liner Hotel, Liverpool, starts at 10, and the website is thebcgroup.org.uk.
That's fabulous, Roger. Thank you. And I'd like to urge the listeners to stay tuned tonight, because I know everyone will be expecting Windows on the World with Mark Windows. Unfortunately, Mark can't be with us tonight, so I believe we've got Freeman Jack standing in for him. So
Hey!
with that, that should be interesting. Jack's always got some off-the-wall subjects to cover, and it's certainly a little bit different to a lot of the stuff that you hear on People's Internet Radio. We'll be back on Friday evening at 7 o'clock, our usual time. As yet, we haven't got a guest lined up, so if we don't line something up, you just might find me and Jason having a natter about what's going on in the world, and seeing if we can come up with any answers between us, which I'm sure we will. I'd like to say a big thank you to Roger for joining us tonight. Also, a big thank you to Peter Bromfield for setting this up for us and putting me in contact with Roger. And I do hope you'll come back on and talk to us after the conference, if you're not too busy, and we can see how things are going, Roger.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to promote the conference, and I hope the listeners will take on board how important it is, and I hope we get the support, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the conference and beyond.
Okay. Have you got anything you'd like to say before we go, Jason?
No, just thanks for listening to everybody. Thank you very much, Roger. Really enjoyed that, despite the technical issues right at the very beginning, but yeah, great show. Thanks very much for coming on, and we'll see you in Liverpool.
Okay.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you guys.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody in the chat room for all the great questions. Thank you again, Jason, and thank you so much, Roger. And we'll play you out with, I think, what might be an appropriate tune. So thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for Freeman Jack, and good night from us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to peoplesinternetradio.com, one of the major voices of truth in our world.